mode.
Welcome everyone to this edition of Scrum Pulse. We're here today to talk with a panel of experts on product ownership. And we call this the Lean Café edition, as you get to talk and interact with these experts in product owners. All of them are professional Scrum trainers with Scrum.org, as am I. And this webcast is sponsored by Scrum.org. We have them periodically, and we'll talk just briefly about them, and then I'll introduce myself, and we'll get an introduction from all the panel members as well. Scrum Pulse is a webinar available approximately monthly from Scrum.org, and you can register and look at previously recorded webinars. All of these webinars are recorded at scrum.org/scrumpulse, and you can also view them on the YouTube channel Scrum.org. Scrum.org, of course, is focused on improving the profession of software development and increasing the focus on empiricism and agility. Of course, Scrum is focused on delivering continuous business value and building trust and respect between business and IT. Your microphones have been muted, but you can interact with us, and we encourage you to ask questions. You can do that two ways. First, you can treat your question to the Scrum.org persona at Scrum.org with the hashtag ScrumPulse, and we'll be monitoring the Twitter feed and relaying those to the panelists during the session. Or you can type your question into the question box right on the GoToWebinar panel that you should be seeing on your screen. So you just open that question panel, you can type your question right into that box, and we'll be monitoring the question panel as well. So please feel free to do that. To get started, let's do some brief introductions of the panelists. I am moderating this session, but I'll also contribute my 2 cents occasionally. My name is Mark Noneman. I'm a managing partner and enterprise agilist with Madison Henry Group, and I've been working in the software development domain exclusively for more than 20 years, and I've been focused on lean and agile processes since about even before the year 2000. So you can see I have electrical engineering degrees, and I've been a professional Scrum trainer for over 4 years. But let's talk to get a little bit of introduction, a little more in depth than mine from the panelists, and let's start with you, Hiren.
Sure. Thank you, Mark, and thanks Scrum.org for giving me the opportunity to be part of the panel and part of this Lean Café edition. So my name is Hiren Doshi. I'm based out of Mumbai, India. I have 21 years of software development professional experience. I've been practicing Agile Scrum for the past 10 years. I'm a director at Practice Agile Solutions Private Limited. That's my company. My graduation is I did my master's in computer science from University of Massachusetts Lowell, and I've worked across different geographies in the US as well as in India. Something that I'm excited about right now is I'm just putting all the experience that I've learned in my new book, Scrum Insights for Practitioners. Hopefully that should be out in a couple of months. So that's me. I'm looking forward to meeting you all.
Sorry, Ralph, I was on mute. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I was just wondering because I couldn't hear a word. So, hi, I'm Ralph. I'm now currently living and working in Switzerland. Before that, I spent a couple of years in the US. Before that, in England. Originally, I'm from Germany. I studied there computer science. I came to Agile around 99, beginning 2000 through extreme programming. Later on, I added Scrum to it. That's pretty much, I guess. So I'm doing Agile, yeah, since 16 years around, and I've been going through all the ranks from being a programmer, tester, now more like an Agile coach, and I have my own company in Switzerland. That's it.
Great, thank you, Ralph. And next, let's hear from Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon Reindl. I'm based in the UK. I've started off coding, a computer science degree, and then in a very similar way to Ralph, went via XP through to Scrum, and for the last 6, 7 years, I've been working as an agile trainer and coach with Scrum.org.
Thank you, Simon. And last but not least, Erik.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erik. I do very similar jobs to everybody else here. I've been a consultant and founded my own company. And most recently, I'm actually taking it to the other side and running a startup called TriCast in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and trying to implement things from the inside out. So actually growing a startup into a larger company using agile practices and techniques and the mindset of being an agile company.
Great. Thank you, Erik. Now, to get things started, what we want to do is issue a little poll to the audience. Maybe if we could pull that poll up, that would be great. And you should be able to see it here on your screen, I hope. What we want to do is find out from the audience what's most important to you, and you can select any one of these as you go through, but let me explain them a little bit. We would like to talk about potentially how does one product owner work with distributed teams or many multiple teams? How do you spread your time when you've got so many people to deal with in a given product development effort? Or how does one product owner work with the different aspects of the product development outside the team, marketing, product management, other forms of management, stakeholders, etc. Or as a product owner, do I really have to know all about the different aspects of the domain itself? Must the product owner write the items on the backlog? And how do I work as a part-time product owner? So if you would select one of those, we'll leave that open for just a minute, and we'll talk about each of them from the highest voted poll item down until we run out of time. If you have additional questions, we certainly would encourage that. When the poll is done, we'll show you how to do that as a reminder. And so far, we have about 90% of you have voted. So from that, let's proceed and start with, we're up to 92%. So let's just give you 5 more seconds to vote, and then we'll move on. Okay, that's good. Let's start with that second item. How does one product owner work with marketing and product management and all these other groups outside of the team? So let's see, who should we pick on first for this? Why don't we start with you, Hiren? What would you say about working with all these different skill sets outside the team?
So this is how I see it, that one product must have one product backlog and one product owner, because as we see, product owner is accountable for maximizing the amount of maximizing the value in the product in terms of increased return of investment and then decreased total cost of ownership. A product owner can be more successful in his or her role as a business person, having full budgetary as well as functional responsibility. Now, if you have multiple parties that are working, what happens is the decision making, the focus, setting up the solid vision, and everything goes out for a toss. So I think having one person accountable for all these different roles does make a lot more sense than just distributing it across. So that's my take.
All right, thank you, Hiren. Ralph, what do you think?
So the way we teach product ownership at Scrum.org actually is that we consider the product owner to be a product manager working in an agile way. So one of the question is product owner and product management. So I would consider a product owner to be essentially a product manager, being really versed, really knowing everything about the domain, having lots of experience in the field. And business analysts, they are part of the cross-functional teams because they have to be around the team when questions arise during the sprint. Marketing, sales, people like that. I think the product owner needs to interact with those, making sure that the right information are available to each of those parties. You can even invite them to the review. That's something I like to do on a regular basis. It's good for marketing or sales to see what's in the pipeline. So essentially, I think in a nutshell, I just summarize it quickly. So the product owner is a product manager just working in an agile way, leveraging empiricism to maximize value. Business analysts are part of the development team, and you can invite product management, marketing and sales, and the other people who and stakeholders into the review.
Good. All right, thank you, Ralph. And Simon, what's your take?
Well, just building on Ralph's answer, I agree fully with what he says. The metaphor I like to use is that of a product owner being a lens through which the development team sees the rest of the organization. So all the people that aren't the product owner for that product are stakeholders, and that product owner has to interact with them and make sure that their ideas are focused clearly on and coherently on the dev team to help them build a structured, coherent product.
Yeah, I'll build on what everybody else said and maybe just offer a bit of tactical advice. I think the question about how do you work with all of these other departments in an organization, there's like an underlying thing, underlying tactic here that I think that we just ought to say out loud, and that is that we do want product owners to work with everybody in the organization, and we want them to be strategically focused and not in the weeds of every single PBI in the product backlog. So the tactic here is that you actually have to get away from writing every single PBI and eliciting every single acceptance criteria, and push more of that onto the team to be responsible for actually maintaining and refining all of the PBIs in the backlog. And that gives you more time to work with marketing and sales and other product managers in the organization.
Cool. Let's follow that thread. Simon, let me ask this follow-up question related to that. If we're going to have the development team write these user stories and refine them and break them down from large items into smaller items that could fit within a sprint, as Erik just alluded to, gosh, if they're spending all that time doing that refinement, aren't they not adding to the product? What do you think about that? Simon, why don't you start? You had your hand up.
It's just building on what Erik said. One of the challenges I see in a lot of organizations, the product owner is not recognized as a full-time job, and it's a title or a role that's given to people on top of a very full role anyway. And so a trend or a pattern I've seen is people saying, hey, let's do this agile thing, we'll do this Scrum thing. Hey, you're the product owner. And they're very busy in their current role instead of clearing space in their schedule for them to be able to honor the commitments of being a focused, dedicated product owner, allowing them to build product backlog items and work with stakeholders and engage with people. So you then end up with it filling in the gaps of an already busy job. So you need to have that organizational support dedicated to support that role. That's a very critical thing.
Right. That certainly makes sense. Hey, Erik, what do you think about this issue? If we're going to have the development team spending time refining the product backlog items, that's time they're not spending creating new value. What do you say to that?
I think what we're doing... sorry.
No, go ahead. Hiren, Erik, they sound the same. Go ahead, Hiren.
Go ahead, Hiren.
So what I think is by allowing the development team to write the PBIs, what we are doing is we are showing that empowerment, we are showing that accountability, that you know what, wow, you can do a good job. So why won't we allow that? Because that gives them more, it allows them to self-organize a bit more, and it will help them even further. So basically you're building the trust, you're building the rapport, and I think it's a very win-win situation. If as a product owner you can delegate the work to the development teams, you empower them. In fact, I'll say, you know, we can go ahead and say, you know what, I also empower you to order the product backlog, but the accountability still lies with the product owner. So if you can take it to that level, that's like awesome.
Outstanding. Thank you, Hiren. And finally, Erik, let's get to you.
Yeah, I think I find it hard to separate the work of understanding the problem from typing code in a computer. Both of those things are developing product. They're both software development. So we actually do want the entire development team, coders, testers, analysts, technical writers, everybody, to understand the work. And part of one really good tactic for how to do that is to have them do a lot of the backlog, day-to-day backlog management of writing PBIs, eliciting acceptance criteria, and really understanding what it is that they're going to be developing.
Good. So the development team's participation in that refinement really gives more ownership to them, and really from a refinement perspective, they know best how to break these items up anyway, so let's get that involved and get them more engaged in self-organization. Ralph, anything to add?
I mean, only one sentence, and I think by what was just explained right now is you eliminate a handover, because sometimes developers, they take a requirement or a product backlog item, user story, and at the end of the sprint they say, well, this is how it was written, this is what I did. And by them being part of the refinement process, actually contributing to it, you take out the handover because they created it on their own. If it doesn't work, it was their own mistake, their own learning they hopefully have in the retrospective, and then they will improve for the next sprint.
Very good. Right, just building more of that self-organization and ownership. We have a lot of questions coming in that are kind of related to this topic. Let's explore this a little bit more. Except they're coming in so fast, they're scrolling off the screen. So here's one from Christine. And the question is, have you seen more than one product owner per development team work? Hiren, what do you think?
So in the context where I work in India, working with different companies, what we see is most of the product owners basically sit in the other part of the world. They're mostly sitting in the US or in the UK geography. And most of the time, just because of the nature of their work, they're actually meeting lots of customers out in the field. And at the same time, development teams are basically starved of their time. So what we have seen is we see all these new roles being generated, like business analyst or a proxy PO, and things getting added to the teams. So that is what I've been seeing. I have my take where I say, you know what, sometimes it works out well when there is a very good trust that is being established between the business analyst and the PO. The PO can empower the business analyst, you know what, you can do whatever I do, I empower you. But at times I've seen, you know, the business analyst just becomes a gatekeeper or like a secretary, just taking the taking product owners' words and just passing it on to the teams. And when it comes to decision making and things, it becomes very poor, and it just generates so much waste into the system. So again, I've seen both the sides.
Okay, thanks, Hiren. So Ralph, what do you think? 2 product owners for a team, does that ever work?
Actually, I have the situation right now, and maybe let me elaborate a little bit. So we had the current company, insurance company I'm currently am, we had a 4-person team and a 5-person developer teams. And because of the skill mismatch, there was always dependency between those teams. And we just said, hey, let's give it a try and let's merge them and make one team of 9 developers. But we had 2 product owners. So we have now kind of a merged product backlog where we have, they are related but different products. So what we're doing right now is we have the refinement, we have the sprint planning, and those things, we do them together with the 2 product owners. They work really well together, so there is no fighting about how many story points each product owner is getting for each sprint, so they arrange pretty well, so there's no fighting on that end. It's working. We see some issues because with the burn downs and things like that, we break it down. We still make it transparent how things are going. Right now, we are working on actually that one of those 2 product owners takes over the role 100%, and the other person basically becomes more like a business analyst, helping out the product owner to provide input. So I think in a nutshell, it's not ideal. If the environment is right and if the product owners get along pretty well, you can work with it, but it's not something I would just say, well, let's do it all the time. It's just something on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. So if they can get along well enough, they can resolve conflicts without conflict.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a problem. Simon, anything to add for multiple product owners for a dev team?
As the guys have said, it's really based on trust. the way I've seen it work really well is when all interactions of every member of the team is done on the basis of the Scrum values of focus, respect, openness, courage, and commitment, so that everybody is working towards that common goal. Then you can have meaningful discussions and you're not having a lot of power struggles, shall we say, and then people will make the decisions with the right intent.
Okay, good. Well, obviously, having a common goal helps with that. Erik, anything to add?
I'll just add that the PO to dev team relationship, I think could have a lot of different flavors and a lot of different organizational patterns there. The important thing to keep in mind is one product owner, one product backlog. And if that means that you have one team or 1,000 teams per product or per product owner, that's kind of like an organizational constraint that you're going to have to live with. So it's very possible that you have one product and 1,000 teams, or that your company has 1,000 products and only one team. But you want to try very hard to maintain the one product owner, one product backlog, because that puts everybody in alignment with the product. And that's really what we're after, is a focus on the product and a focus on value.
Yeah, very good. Let's explore a little bit this idea of, you said whether you have one team or 1,000 teams. Let's touch on that a little bit. Is there a point at which you have so many people in one effort with one product backlog and one product owner that the product owner just can't handle it anymore? And if that's the case, what should they do? Simon, let's start with you. What do you think about that? Lots of people, too much work for the product owner, but the Scrum Guide says there can only be one. What do you do? Oops, I may not be hearing me. I'm not sure. Let's start with Hiren. Can you? Oh, you got it, Simon?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is the classic scaling problem where you've grown to that point where that product owner can't service everyone, and typically you will still. The pattern I've seen work best is where you do have somebody who is accountable for the entire product, and then it is broken into features or chunks, and then there is a feature product owner who then is accountable to the ultimate product owner. And it becomes a scaling pattern then to ensure that the dev teams have enough time with somebody who can answer the detail of the question. The ultimate product owner, the product owner for the whole product, will then be responsible for the road mapping and the vision and all that good stuff.
Similar to the large-scale Scrum model, the huge model where you have area product owners, or perhaps you say feature product owners. All right, good. Hiren, anything to add to that?
Sure. So one of the retail companies that I was working with, what they had was, it was a huge enterprise application, and I don't think there was one product owner who can have the entire domain knowledge of the entire product. So what happened was, even though that person was accountable, he had to put an army under him, and we called them the subject matter experts. So there might be one subject matter expert that just deals with payment gateways and everything. And this product that I'm talking about, it goes live into 8 different countries. So every country has different requirement when it comes to payment. Right? Some countries have 10 digits, some countries have 12 digits of credit card numbers. So one product owner can't do all this. So we need subject matter experts. At the same point in time, every country has different legal requirements. You can't have one product manage everything because you need to get into the details of all these legal requirements. So there are subject matter experts, but eventually all these people roll out, the subject matter experts roll into this product owner, and then the product owner makes the call, helps with the product or with the ordering and stuff, and helps the team by setting that solid vision that, you know what, this is what we want to achieve in this sprint, and that big goal gets divided into sub goals for each team, and at the end we still have one integrated product increment that can be released out to the field.
Okay, so we may have to scale the domain areas and add lots of people there. Interesting to put it into a sort of a product owner organization, if you will. Ralph, what do you think? Have you seen anything different?
No, I think the question you need to ask yourself at the beginning is actually what is your product? I think I see far too many companies that they think too small. They think about a component, that's a product, and then suddenly we have an army of product owners which then need to collaborate and all this dependency management, which is unmanageable. So you need to go up as high as possible, but also as high as reasonable. And that's a tough question sometimes, like what is really a product? And I think it's a good point of view is to look at it from a customer perspective. What kind of service or product or other stuff is your customer consuming, and think about this as your product. And for that you have one product backlog, one product owner. And if this is a big product, you might have, I don't know, we heard about 1,000 development teams. Maybe you have 20, 30, 40 development teams. And that's then basically when you have to go into the scaling, and you can work with maybe area product owners, subject matter experts, and things like that. But the ownership for the entire product still relies and is with the product owner.
Good. I've also seen the subject matter experts, in the development teams also, but that leads to teams that might be better in one area of the product than another, or one domain of the product. Erik, anything to add?
I'm not going to say anything after Ralph's response there. That was spot on.
Okay. Ralph, you get a gold star. Perfect response. Erik said so. Very good. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Let's see. We've got a question kind of back to the product owner working with other parts of the organization. For example, specifically the marketing group. Question here from Sabrina, who is a product owner. She's had an experience where perhaps the product owner working with them might be perceived as maybe interfering or getting in the way in a more traditional organization of sales and marketing. Have you ever experienced that? And maybe what have you recommended to get around that or to deal with that situation?
I'm not sure who we're starting with here. But
I'm sorry. Hiren, I might have been muted when I said that. Hiren, let's start with you.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually right now I'm working with a company that has exactly the same problem, where they have multiple functions. They have product ownership, they have product management, they have product marketing, and so on and so forth. There is a lot of confusion because what happens is there is no clear boundary between the roles. If you start keeping clear boundaries, okay, this is where my role starts and this is where my role ends, and then the other party comes in and that this is where my role starts and this is where it ends, and there is no overlap, I think it will work pretty well. But if there is an overlap in this, there is going to be confusion, there is going to be heartache, there is going to be acidity, lots of things. So try to see if you can manage your role boundaries very well, and I think it might work out, because eventually it's one in unison, you need to deliver something. Good.
Erik, what do you say?
Yeah, I'll take the kind of the opposite side here, I think. The question kind of presupposes that your product owner is not part of sales or marketing or the business, and somehow we're going to step on the toes of sales or marketing in the business. And I think more and more companies are realizing that most really good, very effective product owners actually come from sales, marketing, of the business. So I think if there's some sort of stepping on toes happening between the product owner and the business, you might have actually a product owner selected at too low of a level or too technical of a level, possibly. And we ought to look at finding somebody that actually knows the market, knows the customer, knows the business to play the role of product owner for this product.
All right, very good. I think that sounds wise. Simon, anything to
add? Just building on Erik's answer, is you really have to have a clear understanding of what value you're trying to bring with your product. And so if you understand that, then you should be engaging with these people and bringing them in, so that as you're refining, planning, building roadmaps, using all those techniques of articulating your vision, these people should be engaged and contributing in, because these are the people with great sensitivity to the marketplace. Otherwise, you're just going to do a Windows phone.
Important to build collaborative relationships with those folks then. Ralph, anything to add?
No, I have nothing to add. I think everything was addressed already.
All right, very good. Let's see, Fatima has a question and wonders if it might make sense to delegate some of the tasks into a proxy product owner role and assume more responsibility for supporting the stakeholders. So that's a softball probably. Let's see what you all think about that. Erik, let's start with you. Erik, you're on mute.
My bad. The proxy product owner thing is an interesting one, and I think I take issue with the word proxy. I'm not really sure what that means, but in effect, I think that a pattern where you have one product owner that's market-facing, customer-facing, understands the vision of the product and where we're going, and can talk about that to all of the dev teams, and then having other people on the dev teams that do a lot of the tactical work. I think that pattern is on target for most large products. And it's something that I tell customers to do. It's something that we're doing at our own company. One product owner that is customer facing with an army of support on the development teams to do all of the day-to-day tactical things. I just would rather not call those I just would rather not call those people proxy POs. I'd rather call them developers. And those people could be people that also write code, also do testing, also do analysis, also do technical writing. That's kind of how I think about it.
Okay, great. Ralph, anything to
add? Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much exactly like Erik was just mentioning it. I think you need. So proxy is in between, and proxy usually delays answers, delays questions, and things like that, and you have information loss. It just played Chinese whispers at your kid's birthday, stuff like that, and that's something we want to avoid. We want to have as much kind of speed and clearness and information as much as possible. So, and this goes back to what Erik said. So you have other people taking over responsibilities from the product owner. You might even go ahead and build some capabilities of gathering feedback product so that you can collect them in a big amounts in a fast, easy way. For me, a proxy is, sometimes the thing what Hiren mentioned is that maybe a real product owner is on the other side of the globe, and you might have to have somebody on your side you have to talk to, but you need to be aware about the risk. It means delays, it means inventory, and it means additional costs.
Good. Yeah, the last thing we need is more people in the way. I often describe the product owner as a bridge or maybe a conduit between stakeholders and the development team, and they're not an intermediary, and yet, so we don't want to add yet another intermediary with a proxy that delays, as you said, Ralph, as everyone has said, that delays communication. That's the critical issue there. Cool. Let's move on to another question from Fabian. His question was a concern about this discussion where we're having with using the development team to do a lot of the work of breaking down the items in the product backlog. He's concerned, I'll read it to you, won't I lose track of my own product if I have the development team write more and more of the user stories instead of doing this myself? Hey, Simon, what do you think?
Well, you have to, you're right. There is potential for you if you're not paying attention, but you're part of the Scrum team. You don't have to write the minutiae of the PBIs. You would need to be aware of the data that's in them. You'd need to understand and agree the acceptance criteria. You'd need to make sure that they're in a fit state to go into a sprint. So you will definitely be engaged, but you don't have to write them. It's a whole lot easier to edit and refine something once it's originally written. So you would still be there, you're still accountable for your product backlog, and you need to understand what's there. It's just taking some of that stuff out. It might even be a subject matter expert who is very close to that. Like if the app is dedicated towards a sales rep that's on the road, you might have somebody come in with a story going, hey, if you put this in the product, it's going to make my life superbly better. You don't have to write that PBI, but you have to choose where it's going to be fit in your product backlog.
Good. Thank you. Ralph, what do you think about this issue of losing track of the product if the development team is working the product backlog?
I mean, just building on what Simon just said, and I completely agree. And what I would like to add is that you have nuances of value in your items. Maybe you have a couple of items, they're just boilerplate. They need to be done. It's maybe registering clients, doing this or that. Dev team knows how to do that. Just give it to them, and use the freed up time to really focus on the key features, the ones who really are going to differentiate you from the other products which are already on the market. So I think this is actually, it's not a loss you have. I think it's a gain you can have if you use it right.
Good. Hiren?
So my take is basically, as a PO, I have to build that trust with my team. Yeah, I have to build so much trust with my team, and to do that, I have to work with them very closely. Once I have built that trust, once I have built that rapport, I can empower them and say, guys, I trust you, go ahead and do the work. Yeah, and they'll go miles to ensure that they don't fail the PO. But that rapport has to be built that, okay, when I'm saying A, you get that A. And when you say B, I get that B. If that is built, that connection is built, I think you're gold over there.
Great. Really important to view the product owner as part of the whole team. And often I have clients where the product owner is somehow separated and outside the team, and that trust just wasn't built the same way. Simon, you said something interesting. I want to explore it a little bit more because, of course, we know the product owner is responsible for ordering the backlog, deciding what's most important to do next. To what degree do you think the development team should be involved in ordering, either by providing information or by actually ordering perhaps items that they've refined from larger items? What do you think about that, Simon?
I think the dev team are instrumental in ordering, particularly when you start scaling. It happens even in one team. You'll have technical dependencies or things that might make it more efficient or more cost effective to build features in together. It might mean that you've only got to run one set of regression tests. It is so critical that the development team are listened to and challenged, so that they don't play the, oh, it's a dependency card to get their favorite cool technology gadget put at the top, but listened to and engaged with so that you get some constructive ordering. And when you start scaling in the Nexus, when you start looking at your roadmap with the Nexus and also sprint planning in the Nexus, it's really critical that team are in the room so that you can hash out all these dependencies and ensure that they're met so that you get a working increment built at the end of your sprint.
Very good. Anyone else have anything to add on the panel about this idea of development team involved with prioritization or ordering?
I think that response was spot on. PO still gets the final say in every case, but at some scale, even just with one product, you have to rely on your dev team to tell you what the most effective order would be for building out the product.
Right, right. And sometimes refer to that as cohesion. How do we order the items so that they go together? I often have clients where they've got a variety of different snippets of development going on in a given sprint, and it's really hard to create a goal for the team to rally around. But if you can order them in such a way that they group and they have a relationship with each other, allows the team to be more productive. Great. And as Barry Cogswell wrote in the question window, you can delegate responsibility, not accountability. And maybe I would say you can delegate tasks, but the product owner retains that accountability, as Erik just said. Let's see. Another question from Fatima. Let's see. It says, you could be able to prioritize at a high level, but the low-level work would be done by this proxy. So this is back to this proxy PO. Again, as long as that's within that sort of, Hiren sort of described it as a group of product owners, or maybe, I hate to use the word hierarchy, but let me say making sure that the product owner retains responsibility. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, this is a more philosophical question, and we'll just kind of go sequentially. For each of you, what do you think is the biggest mystery of product ownership? What do you say, Hiren? What does that mean to you?
Biggest mystery of product ownership, yeah? I'll pass on. I'll just wait on. Let me think about it. Ralph, why don't you go first?
Okay, Ralph, do you have an idea
Yeah,
about that?
I just thought it's unfair. You always go first, so we have more time to come up with a smart question. I think what's really challenging is for a product owner is to let go of thinking in a big bag of requirements. That's all we need, and really think about what's the most important feature, and then really establish the feedback loop for empiricism. And let's say you have 2 weekly sprints, you go out there and you show them something, you learn, you adjust your product backlog, which is a living artifact. And I think this is I think especially with new product owners, I often see that they come with their requirements and that's what I want. So and then they start to work on it and leverage Scrum, which is a good first step. But I think really to become empirical and to trust the feedback loop you build within Scrum. I think that's the toughest challenge, the biggest mystery I usually see.
Good. Sort of a leap of faith. Simon, what's the biggest mystery of product ownership?
Just building on what Ralph said, is to make the next slice of chocolate cake taste just as good as the last one, if not better. So get some really good empiricism in there so that your customer just keeps going, nice, more please.
All right, good. Maybe add some whipped cream next time. Erik, what do you say? Hiren, I'm saving it for last for you. Erik, what do you say?
I think the biggest mystery, the hardest part about being a product owner is really getting your head wrapped around the market. Most companies are too inside out. They're too focused on their process and what happens inside the building. And the biggest challenge for a product owner is to spend most of your time with customers, potential customers, and other people that we would kind of just consider the market at large, to really understand the landscape and context within which your product is operating.
Good. Maybe linking into what Ralph was saying around a little bit of faith to get stuff out there and get that feedback. Because sometimes it's hard to get the feedback, especially when it's not good. Hiren, your turn. You've had time to think about it. What do you think is the biggest mystery of product ownership?
I think their biggest mystery is building the right thing and the thing right is the biggest thing that they need to think of, because it's all about return of investment. If they think of a feature that the market does not want and the team has worked for 6 months on that and you take it out, nobody wants it, that's that much money down the drain right there. So that is something.
Build the right product. How do you do that? That's a challenge. Hey, let's get back to some more pragmatic questions from Matt. And we talked a bit before. Somebody brought up the opportunity or the possibility of having one product owner, one product backlog, but multiple products. And Matt has a question about, can you talk a little bit about how do you maintain a backlog, particularly, this is my addition, but ordering the backlog, that supports multiple products with many small non-related stories or items on that backlog? How do you set common sprint goals and have the team sprint towards a shared goal by ordering this backlog? Let's start with Erik this time. What do you think?
Sure. I typed an answer in there for Matt, and he has some really good follow-up questions. So this will be a good discussion. When you have many products in one team, the job of a PO or the POs for each individual product is to really decide what's most valuable for the organization. And now you have more than one dimension to think in terms of value. Of course, we're thinking in terms of value as in which one of these enhancements are going to produce the greatest effect for our customers. But you also have to think in terms of the cost that it takes to produce each individual PBI from multiple different products. And sometimes, depending upon what your technology is and how your team is used to operating, it's just too expensive to switch back and forth between many, many, many different products in one sprint. One day for sure, but even one sprint. So the job of the PO really has to become to figure out what makes sense for stacking up work for a sprint. In many cases, I think people default to working on many things, and you really ought to start thinking about letting the teams focus on one thing at a time before we move on to the next. because that's going to be the most efficient way to do things. But like I said, the job of the product owner in these cases is really hard because you have to weigh the value not only of what you're producing, but the cost that it takes the teams to switch between different products as well.
Yeah, I often see this in IT organizations that focus on sort of supporting internal systems, very small number of people supporting a whole bunch of different diverse products, so it's quite a challenge. So focus, I think, is what I heard you recommend. Ralph, anything to add about if you have one team working on lots of different systems and products in the same product backlog?
Well, yeah, what you just mentioned, sometimes, especially with smaller companies, they have like a few products they need to maintain and keep on developing, growing them, and one team or maybe two teams. And I think just building on what Erik said, I think at that point you have to really be worried about efficiency, because if you task switch throughout the day forward and backward as a developer, your productivity will really go down. I just recently read a statistic, I can't remember where it was, but if you are focused on one product for 95% or more, you're twice as effective as if it's only 50%. And I think that's something you really want to leverage. So yeah, if you switch, then maybe think in the boundaries of a sprint. Maybe for one sprint you work on product A, for the next sprint you work on product B. Maybe you work for 2 sprints on product B and then you go back to A. And I think this balancing, that's again something the product owner has to be aware about and think about what's the best for the whole company right now, what provides the most value.
All right, good. Of course, you got a lot of different stakeholders asking for lots of different things and lots of different systems. I know sometimes we've experimented with even shorter sprints, maybe 1-week sprints, so that you can change direction more frequently. Maybe that's something. Simon, anything to add about that? One team work on multiple products?
I think the guys have covered it. Don't context switch. Make sure that you have a clear feedback loop, and you get more done doing one thing than trying to time slice.
Great. Hiren, anything?
Yeah, so my take is stop multitasking, like everyone said, but I can give one tactical advice. So what I see in my teams over here, there's a lot of ad hoc work that keeps on coming. Yeah, there are planned work and there's a lot of ad hoc work. And again, the same thing happens about the multitasking, what is going to move out, what is going to spill over. So what I at least suggest is, in the sprint planning, you slice your pie in such a way that, you're going to have planned work and you will have some slice for unplanned work or ad hoc work. So when the ad hoc work comes in, basically your planned work is not distracted and you can still take those. So something of that sort can be worked out, but try to complete one feature at a time rather than saying, I'll give partial A, partial B, partial C, because that's like the value comes much later. So move away from that.
All right, good. So if you're using Scrum, it's still Scrum and the values still apply, whether it's one product or multiple. All right, good. There's a little bit different angle. We've talked about the product owner working with lots of people or complex, lots of systems perhaps. Another angle that's often a problem we hear about is that you're a part-time product owner. I only spend 50% of my time on this product, or maybe less. What do you think about that? Ralph, what do you think?
I have gone so far that when a company calls me up and asks for help, I'll ask the question, the product owner, how many % will I have, him or her? And if the answer is 50% or something like that, I tell them, no, that's not going to work. So if I don't get a product owner 100% for that product, I'm not coming. Because I have seen it failing over and over again, because I had cases where product owner was 50% product owner and 50% of other work, and the 50% of the other work was actually 100% of the other work, and that person was assessed on a yearly basis on the other work. So you can imagine how well the product ownership was done. So the product backlog was in a bad state, the value wasn't delivered, all those problems were coming up, and we built then pressure on the product owner with the result that he left the company, which kind of even left a bigger gap. So it's a vicious cycle. So I think, and I'm really trying to make it clear to people, product ownership is a full-time job because you own the product, you're responsible, you're accountable for it.
All right, no part-time product owners for Ralph. Erik, you're nodding. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think it's interesting that we have some discussions here and amongst trainers and at clients, and this stack of questions in the WebEx, They all point to how can one person possibly do this job? It's so big, it's such a big job. And then immediately after that, we hear people say, yeah, but I'm really only going to have 10 or 20 hours a week to do this. And those things just don't mesh in my mind. If there's one Scrum role that needs to be full-time, it's the product owner. Everything else, I'm willing to work with teams and organizations on, but a part-time PO or a PO that is kind of a product owner in name only and still has 3 full-time other jobs is just never really going to be effective. Mark, you're on mute.
Thank you. Hiren, what do you think? Anything to add?
Yeah, so my take is a bit different. So the way I see it is, even if you're part-time PO, but if you're doing full justice to the role, full justice to the product, then who are we to stop you from going and doing some other roles? But if you're not doing justice to your current role, and if teams are suffering, then that's a big problem. So look at it, look at the challenges that you guys are facing, document it, bring it out in the retrospective and say, you know what, you being part-time, these are the challenges that we are seeing. If you don't see any challenges, the product owner is doing the job well, fair enough, you can do whatever you want, it doesn't matter.
All right. So inspect and adapt.
Because of your part-time availability, we are getting impeded, not allowed. We need to do something more about this.
Okay. Excuse me for talking over you, didn't mean to. Simon, anything to add there?
Yeah, I understand and really agree wholeheartedly with what Erik and Ralph have said. I've had challenges in organizations where you say, look, these people need to be full-time, and they push back and they say, oh, we can't possibly do that. So I try an empirical approach and say, let's try an experiment. Let's have one team with a dedicated product owner, and let's have another team with somebody that's part-time. And then after a couple of sprints, it doesn't take very long for the evidence to present itself back, and they'll say, hey, how come team Z is doing so brilliantly and team X is not doing so well? And it then becomes evidential that having enough product owner time to look after everything, that whole gamut of activity that a product owner requires, it becomes self-explanatory.
Good.
And that way it's even better, because then the organization makes the epiphany and you're not just telling them stuff. Right.
Yeah, I wish I had the luxury to tell clients I'm just not going to show up if you don't have a full-time product owner. But anyway, thank you. Yeah, I think sometimes we just have to work with the dysfunctions and help them see the light. Maybe by experimenting, as you said, Simon, would be a great way to do it. Now, we talked a little bit about a part-time product owner and a product owner spread too thin, lots and lots of people. What about it's full-time maybe, but a remote product owner, not present with teams or maybe present with stakeholders or customers? Any experience with that? Ralph, what do you think?
So just to make sure I got the question right, so you're talking about a product owner who isn't available enough to the development team?
I don't know about available, but they're not physically present. They're in a remote location. They're having to communicate via video or telephone or email.
Okay. So I once was kind of quite a couple of years back, but it was at a pharmaceutical company where we were developing software for the researchers, internal researchers, and when our product owner, he was like a super smart person, like well above everybody else, and he was on conferences and flying around and seminars and talking to other people, and he knew everything, but he was hardly around. So and we, kind of, I just thought, okay, well, you're not preparing your work correctly, we can't do our work, so there's an impact, and I was trying to force him, which failed horribly, so that was a learning on my end. So I just basically sat down with him once he was in the office and just said, hey, let's find a way how to make it happen, and it really went back to what we talked about beforehand. So the development team was then taking over the refinement. So he described what he needed, or even why he needed something, and we came up with ideas and we run it by him. Maybe we sent him an email, maybe we had a WebEx conference when he was on the other side of the globe, stuff like that, and then he said, good, not good, this and this needs to be improved, and we went back to changing it until it was ready, and then we brought it into a sprint. So this completely changed the refinement process as I usually see it, because we looked more ahead. It took us more iterations to get through until it was ready, but at the end it worked pretty well.
Okay, well that sounds very practical, and I often hear people saying, well, that Scrum theory is all well and good, but how do you really do it? And that sounds like a good example of let's inspect and adapt. If it's not working, let's experiment with different approaches. Anyone have anything to add about a remote product owner not physically present? Hiren?
Yeah, so most of my clients fall in this category because we work out of this Indian geography, and most of the on-site clients are over there in US or other parts of the geography, and most of the POs are over there. So what we try to do is we try to have an overlap. So when we are working with the UK, we start at 11:30, so at least we get like 3 to 4 hours of overlap where the PO can work very closely with the team. We also look at the opportunities where we use Skype, because technology is so good nowadays. Skype, the telepresence, whatever is available, use that type of mode to have that communication going. That works out pretty well. Fly and spend some time with the teams to build that trust, enable them, collaborate with them. That also works out very well. So I think there is no excuse that even if you are remote PO, you can't be effective. I think it can be effective. And again, as Ralph said, you can do inspection and adaptation on what is working well, what is not working well, and just take it from there.
Thank you. Simon, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, that's how Hiren and I met. I was working with the UK side, and Hiren was working with the guys based in Bangalore. And the key, as Hiren said, is getting people to talk. Now, you're going to have to spend some money. You're going to have video conferencing time, preferably face-to-face. It's amazing what sharing a meal will do to building that team communication. So if you can build the trust up, and you really need trust, because when things are being discussed of an immensely emotional or technical level, over a laggy voice over IP connection, it gets tricky. Face-to-face trumps web chat trumps voice chat trumps email trumps letters beat pigeon. Don't use the pigeon.
For those of you still using pigeons. Erik, anything to add?
No, I think you guys are spot on. I'd say the same way that we want the dev team to be co-located if at all possible, I'd actually say that I want the PO to be co-located with the customer as much as possible. So I think if there's one position that does work remotely, it comes with all the same challenges as any remote position, but if there's one position that does work remotely, it might be the PO.
Great. Hey, I really want to thank you guys. But I would like to remind people about the future Scrum Pulses, and you can connect with the Scrum.org community. You can certainly go to connect into the community page. You can also look at the previously recorded Scrum Pulses and go to the forums on the Scrum.org page in order to learn more. And also the blog posts, the Scrum.org blog posts, PSTs, the folks you had on this panel, myself, and all the other PSTs contribute to those blog posts. So certainly a panel of experts that are conveying their knowledge, experience, and wisdom at all times through the Scrum.org blog post. So panelists, I really want to thank you. Hiren, I appreciate your participation late at night in India. Likewise, Ralph in Europe, and Simon in Europe as well, and Erik here in the United States. Thank you very much for your time, your expertise, sharing your wisdom with the audience. Thank you, audience, for participating and asking such great, wonderful questions. And again, tell your friends and your colleagues about Scrum Pulse. We'd love to have you in future Scrum Pulse. And you can find future Scrum Pulse at scrum.org/Scrum Pulse and register for them there. Again, thank you very much, and so long.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.